Unluckiest driver in the world.
Usually, if a Formula 1 driver says this, we would laugh at them, call them washed, and maybe humble them by reminding them that they are in the top level of motorsport, something millions of people wish they could do. But when Fernando Alonso said that, I think a lot of us genuinely felt bad for him. Which sounds a bit weird to say considering he's a two-time Formula 1 world champion, a two-time Le Mans winner, and a world endurance champion. But many would argue that his luck over the years has been absolutely horrific. However, today I raise you this question. Was it all really bad luck? Or could Fernando have steered his career in a different direction and then actually ended up with a lot more success? Maybe for this video, I actually need to give him a hug because Fernando, it's gonna be painful, man. It's gonna be painful. Big man Alonso started his career about as unlucky as you can be in Formula 1 by driving for Minardi. This team's car was so bad, it was genuinely like driving a go-kart in comparison to the other F1 teams.
Is that fucking Max Verstappen? Oh!
But other than that, as he sort of worked himself up through the sport, things went well for Fernando. And by 2006, he became a two-time world champion driving Renault cars, which, as you might be thinking, that's not too bad at all. But it was straight after this where things began to go wrong. However, firstly, you may notice a little change in my background, and that is the artwork of Fernando Alonso's Aston Martin. I wonder who my favorite driver is, and one of my personal favorite F1 cars, the F2004. And that's because today's sponsor is David Tyres Art. David is an artist from the UK currently living in Canada, and his art aims to capture the speed of motorsport through the fluid movements of paint. Honestly, as a huge F1 fan, I know, who would have guessed it? Me, an F1 fan. But these fine art prints look absolutely amazing. Most of the prints measure 17 by 22 inches and are produced with archival inks on museum grade paper. That's what gives it that stunning color, as well as long-lasting quality. These prints are limited releases, and as you can see, they're all numbered and personally signed by David. That's because they offer a unique, one-of-a-kind look at Formula 1 and motorsport through David's eyes. Each print is also shipped in a protective tube to ensure they arrive in perfect condition, as mine did. They're also shipped directly from David's home studio, which gives you a bit of a personal connection with the artist. Genuinely, you can tell these are made by someone with a passion for motorsport like myself and probably you watching. Whether it's a print or an original, you are owning a piece of motorsport as seen through David's perspective, and you can grab yourself a 10% discount on fine art prints at davidtyresart.com using code DAN10 at the checkout. But let's see where it all went wrong for Fernando Alonso, because at the start of 2007, this man was on the top of the world. He was the reigning world champion. He had just been paid a reported $50 million for a 2-year deal at McLaren, and that team was set to have one of the best cars on the grid. But actually, this season would be the beginning of a downturn for Fernando Alonso. He just didn't know it yet. It all starts with Spygate. If you don't know anything about F1, you might think this is an entrance with a Ring doorbell on the front. But in Formula 1, Spygate actually refers to the controversy that happened in 2007, where a high-level McLaren engineer was found to be stealing and copying classified Ferrari F1 car documents. Honestly, big shout out to the random f***ing dude in a photocopying shop in Woking who thought to himself, it's a bit weird this guy is photocopying a bunch of classified Ferrari documents. Let me just ring up Ferrari real quick and check if that's alright. Oi, Ferrari, is some random Englishman meant to have all your documents? Huh? Because without him, who knows what more could have gone on. In terms of actual bad luck for Alonso, this didn't really change too much. McLaren got smacked with a huge fine and also disqualified from the Constructors' Championship. But as the FIA found no Ferrari components on the car, the McLaren drivers were given the "you alright" to race as normal. And so Fernando's season could just go on as usual. Going into the actual season, Alonso probably thought he was going to have a pretty easy time racing his teammate. That's because his teammate was a rookie. How lucky? The small problem was that the rookie 3 was Lewis Hamilton. And before we get into anything, I'm just going to put forward a couple pieces of information. Number 1, Lewis Hamilton was really fucking good. Even watching his junior career, Lewis looked like he was going to be a very strong driver. And then number 2, the testing. I know people are waiting for me to mention this. A lot of Team LH get really upset when you bring this up. It's not to discredit Hamilton, it is just to explain why Fernando and Lewis ended up so close. So I'm going to try my best to avoid being assassinated in my own home here. In modern Formula 1, rookies are given very little testing, and most of the testing they actually do is in outdated machinery. In 2007, there wasn't any rules like that. So Lewis Hamilton did nearly a full season's worth of laps in the 2007 car before the season had even begun.
That's quite big.
Which therefore got him relatively up to speed, although of course there was still room for learning. Reminder, that is not me saying Hamilton is le bad. It is just me explaining why things might be harder for Alonso than was initially expected. There was also the tires. If you are a current F1 viewer, you'll know that each F1 team runs the same tires every weekend. But when Alonso was at Renault, there were 2 different tire companies providing the teams with tires. And Renault were using the Michelin tires. For 2007, that was changing. All of the teams were going to be using the Bridgestone tires as Michelin were pulling out. And so Alonso would also have to get used to how these new tires worked, which of course would detriment his pace. So if you actually combine all of these factors together, it makes perfect sense why Lewis Hamilton was so close to him on track. Now I'm actually going to come back to the meat and potatoes of what happened in 2007 later on, because later in this video, we are going to talk about whether it was actually all good or bad luck. Let's just say that for 2008, his McLaren contract had ended early, and he was now back at Renault.
Who wants a fucking burger?
The Renault team were pretty much stuck in the top end of the midfield. And in 2008, Alonso found himself in yet another gate. No, not your grandma's back garden gate. This time it was called crashgate. His team had cheated by fixing a race in Singapore. If you want to hear the full story about crashgate, you can watch my video on the Renault/Alpine team up here. But all you really need to know is that it reflected very poorly on Fernando Alonso when all of it came out in 2009. Now, most people don't really point too much to this phase of his career being bad luck, and we'll get into why that was later on, but you can see where Fernando first found himself having a lot of factors out of his control stacked against him. It's not like he could have prevented Michelin from leaving the sport. He couldn't have really foreseen or done anything about Lewis Hamilton being so good. And according to the FIA at least, he wasn't actually involved in any of the gates. He just kind of found himself in them. Although it's up for debate whether he actually knew about crashgate or not. But it's really the next part of his career where the most bad luck comes in.
All the time you have to leave a place.
Hey look, it's 2010, and Alonso is dressed in the same outfit he does when he stood behind me. Hopefully, he gets some good luck at Ferrari. 2010, Alonso loses the World Championship by 4 points, which in F1, scientifically speaking, is barely anything. And many point to the last race of the season where Fernando Alonso lost out. Ferrari did their classic pit strategy. That's probably a little bit harsh, but let's talk about what did happen. Alonso was called in very hastily for a pit stop.
Box.
This was because Ferrari were very keen to keep him in front of Red Bull's Mark Webber. This was in order to get him to finish ahead of Webber and in a high enough position to secure the World Championship. The problem was that in doing this pit stop, Ferrari were relying on Alonso with less of a tyre offset, passing the Renault of Vitaly Petrov and the Mercedes of Nico Rosberg, who had pitted a bit earlier under a safety car. And now this was the issue. Alonso just couldn't get past Petrov. Vitaly had a race of his own and he was playing defensive. With some defensive skills, earlier in the season, he had even demonstrated to Fernando before. The bit where the real bad luck comes into play, apart from Ferrari's pit strategy not being great, was that had this race taken place a year later, the FIA would have introduced DRS, which was a direct response to how hard it was to overtake in 2010. again. And that's again some bad luck. Understandably, Alonso was pretty frustrated during the race. He could smell victory that day, or maybe it was just the French car nearly setting itself on fire in front of him. But either way, he was blocked from achieving it.
You sent me a message first, yeah? I live in Smethwick, Birmingham. If you want the fucking brawl, come to...
Hey, listen. It's not that bad, mate. Yeah? It's not that bad. He got another shot at the title in 2012. What a great year 2012 was. I sure love Gangnam Style. This is probably the only year where I'm going to put Fernando Alonso missing out on a world title down purely to bad luck. I think, and I'm not being held at gunpoint, this has got to be one of the greatest individual performances over an F1 season, and that for Fernando to miss out on the World Championship by just 3 points was awful. The Ferrari car on pace was nowhere really near Sebastian Vettel's Red Bull, but Alonso was still able to stay in the hunt for the title throughout the entire year. And it's basically agreed upon by everyone in Formula One that he lost that World Championship by no fault of his own. At the start of the Belgian Grand Prix, Fernando Alonso was in 5th place. Now, purely from just looking at how the rest of the race went and where his teammate was able to finish, there's most likely no reason Fernando Alonso wouldn't have finished lower than this. In fact, it's actually more than likely he would have moved forward a couple places in the race, as the car definitely seemed to prefer Sundays over Saturday qualifying. Garfield R racing car. Unfortunately for Alonso, the race start had a surprise in store. Something I always like to remember as
Arrival.
Roman Grosjean had already been involved in 6 incidents on race starts during the 2012 season prior to the Spa-Francorchamps Grand Prix. And here in Belgium, he continued this trend by masterfully cutting off Lewis Hamilton, causing a big fuck-off crash, and took out 5 cars, including Fernando Alonso, who actually, on a very serious note, as this was before the halo was introduced, nearly had his head cut off. I know hindsight is 2020, but how did we not see having a big fuck-off ring around the driver's head as a good idea for the longest time? I don't know. Listen to Jackie Stewart.
That's why he's the GOAT!
Anyway, for this incident and all of the many others he loved to get involved with, Grosjean was handed a race ban because he essentially acted like me in the F1 games.
I don't think that...
I don't care about ERS! I don't care! I don't care! The last thing on my mind right now is the fucking ERS being fucking low. My hands have melted.
As you could probably see, this incident was completely not Fernando Alonso's fault, and he was just a passenger in this event. If we assume the race panned out relatively the same, had he not been involved in Roman Grosjean's stupidity, it's likely he would have got the 3 points and a bit more that he needed and won the world title. But then again, in the words of 4-time world champion Max Verstappen, if my mum had balls, she would be my dad.
If my balls...
Moving forward, Ferrari really didn't build a car worthy of being a title contender, and in 2014, Alonso left the team after driving a car that both oversteered and understeered at the same time. If you don't watch F1, that is like cooking chicken that is both burnt and gives you salmonella. This wasn't the end of bad luck for Fernando though, because his next hit of bad luck came in his move to McLaren. He was hoping they'd be a better option in this new era of regulations. Most would see McLaren as one of the top teams at this point. They'd scored consistent wins over the last few years, with Lewis Hamilton and Jenson Button as their drivers. And like Ferrari, they were always expected to run near the front during a regulation cycle. Unfortunately, for Fernando Alonso, that was not the case. He was left driving what can only be described as an absolute shitbox, that half the time would end up DNFing because the engine was just crap. And you know what? I will let Fernando Alonso say the rest for you.
GP2 engine. GP2.
The engine was going much slower than before.
Mate, I have no brakes. No tires. We are out of the points.
over here stroking my dick. I got lotion on my dick.
This was yet another long period of nothing for Fernando Alonso. And honestly, leaves us moving forward to the final part of his bad luck saga. At the end of 2018, a year he served at McLaren, he left Formula One. Then he actually won some shit, like Le Mans and the World Endurance Championship, did some stuff in Dakar. And then he came back to F1 in 2021 with Alpine. Us. I'm so immature. Alpinus. Hilarious. At this point, I'm actually going to say he had good luck. Wow, who would have thought I'd be saying that in this video? Considering when he came back to F1, he came back to a team that were able to score podiums and even helped his teammate achieve a race win. Mostly because Bottas went bowling, but you don't need to worry about that. There were definitely elements of bad luck, especially in his second season at Alpine in 2022. He was again plagued with a lot of engine failures, but what do you expect? You're driving a Renault engine, pal. Seriously. And of course, there was also the small amount of bad luck that year, being partnered with a teammate that occasionally tried to kill you. But then, 2023 seemed like it was about to be the biggest change we'd ever seen for Fernando Alonso. He made a bold move to Aston Martin. Aston Martin? And that was a bit of a shock, considering Alpine definitely looked like the better team over the 2 years before. But it worked. And at the start of that year, Fernando Alonso reminded me that I need to thank my channel members for supporting the channel. Sorry, this is just a quick one though. These guys do pay a small fee as low as 99p a month to support the channel, and I really do appreciate it. So thank you. But let's get back to 2023, because Fernando Alonso was on the podium multiple times throughout that year. The team was the clear second best, and he came the closest to a race win he had been since 2013. It really looked like Fernando had made the best move of his career. Until, of course, inevitably, the team fell backwards to the point where this year, Fernando Alonso has had his worst start since 2001 with Minardi, the f***ing go-kart. And let me just run you down the bad luck he's had so far this year. A crash in Australia that was caused by the car in front leaving gravel on the track, a DNF in China with brake failures while being in the points, bad timing with the safety car in Imola, again while running in the points, which also prompted that radio message you heard at the start of the video.
Luckiest driver in the world.
Then, while in the points again in Monaco, he DNF'd with an engine issue. After in qualifying, setting like the perfect lap. He basically got all the performance out of the car. And talking of qualifying, all of this bad luck occurred while Fernando Alonso has out-qualified his teammate Lance Stroll in every Grand Prix qualifying session so far, with Lance only beating him in China sprint qualifying. And while for the whole season, Fernando Alonso has clearly had the better pace over Lance Stroll, he's not even threatening me to say this. This is off my own back. I'm defending this man. The points tally does not tell the whole story. But yet, people are calling Alonso rubbish because they can't look past the scoreboard and just watch the races and see how incredibly unlucky he's been and how his pace is still better than that of Lance Stroll's.
Scoreboard! Scoreboard! Oh, what happened to your friend?
Okay, that got a bit passionate from me. In Spain, he did have a good result. He scored points, and those points got boosted by Max Verstappen's penalty for the funny. What was Max thinking? And in the interest of fairness, I am going to go through the other side of the argument, because here you can clearly see Alonso has had some terrible luck over his career, but it hasn't all been bad luck. That dad no skill guy, he's an idiot. Because he just spent the last however many minutes explaining all the reasons why none of this is Fernando's fault. It's all just bad luck. Oh, you poor. Get out! But that's just not the case. We're going to go back through these situations and actually look at what Fernando could have done differently. Sorry, Fernando. Starting off with 2007 again. Now, personally, I think the move to McLaren was the right thing to do. Clearly, at the time, it was the best car alongside the Ferrari. The problem was that he kind of let things boil over. Like, sure, I'll admit there were factors out of his control. The tires and Lewis Hamilton's testing that then then put them on the same pace. And so Fernando had to race if he wanted to win that championship. However, it was once he began accusing the team of favoring Lewis Hamilton that it all started to go downhill. And there may have been elements of that. There may have been the team boss, Ron Dennis, favoring Hamilton over Alonso because Hamilton was homegrown. But it all really came to a head in Hungary, where Lewis Hamilton disobeyed a team order, which was that Fernando was meant to have the last run in qualifying. That's because the track is at its best near the end of the session. And Alonso let his anger get to him. He held up Hamilton in the pit lane as revenge.
Move! Why don't you move?
I guess. And Alonso did end up getting the pole position, but he then also got a grid penalty, which ultimately that cost him in the race for the World Championship. Hungary is quite a difficult track to overtake at, and Fernando was only able to make up 2 positions from his penalty to finish 4th. Now, even if Lewis did disobey the team order, who's to say Fernando still wouldn't have got pole position? Or most likely he would have still got P2, and therefore he would have got a vastly bigger points haul that weekend, even if he finished 2nd. And actually, if you work it out, if he did finish 2nd instead of 4th, he would have won the championship. Letting that anger boil him over, that's what cost him. You can even look at that being the catalyst for the bad luck at Renault in 2008 and 2009, because he'd fallen out so badly with everyone at McLaren. Alonso didn't choose to leave. They kicked him out. I mean, obviously, Alonso would claim it was mutual, but ending a 2-year contract early after 1 year when the team was very clearly the best on the grid, well, that's never really going to be the driver's choice, is it?
Doingo.
And so he ended up further back in the grid at Renault again, with rumours, and this was purely speculation, but rumours of McLaren forcing him to go to a team that wasn't going to be capable of fighting at the front. Of course, that can't be verified, and how realistically could they know if Renault was going to be a top team or not? So take that one with not just a pinch of salt, but a huge volcanic eruption of salt. Let's move on though to the Ferrari years, and let's have a look at the bad luck in 2010. Now, over the season, I don't think particularly much could have been done differently. I'm sure there were mistakes from both Fernando and Vettel, but nothing more than your usual F1 driver. However, what I can talk about is Fernando had the chance to be at Red Bull in 2008 and 2009 instead of Sebastian Vettel. After the fallout at McLaren, Christian Horner was desperate to sign Fernando Alonso, and he attempted apparently to get a 2-year contract with him, but Fernando was only willing to sign for 1 year. This was because his talks with Ferrari were already underway. Here's the thing. We know Red Bull fought for the championship in 2009 against Jenson Button and Brawn. Who knows if Fernando could have won the championship in that car, or whether that would have convinced him to stay at Red Bull for 2010, and therefore that would have put him in the better car. And again, that's not luck. That's Fernando actively choosing to be with Ferrari instead of Red Bull, which at the time had Adrian Newey attached to it. And Adrian Newey is basically the man who designs the best cars in Formula 1. He sees aerodynamics. We see a cow like this, he sees a cow like that. So maybe stuff like that should have been a bigger factor for Alonso. Of course, I can see this from the other side. Most people in the F1 space value getting a world championship with Ferrari a lot more than just getting a world championship. Call me a bit of a Ferrari glazer, but when you are already a world champion, there is more of an appeal to become an F1 hero and win that title with Ferrari than there is to just keep stacking title after title after title. And I believe that was a big factor for Alonso. And so can you really blame him for picking Ferrari over an energy drink? The next element of bad luck came in the form of the move to McLaren again. This one also wasn't entirely Fernando's choice. Over the 2013 and 2014 season, Alonso really began to have a breakdown in his relationship with Ferrari, basically just voicing his frustration at the team that they weren't winning titles.
It's a Ferrari.
It's a shitbox.
And also the team in return being quite upset with Fernando exploring other options. Again, he allowed his frustration with a team to boil over and cause the breakdown in their relationship. Jesus Christ, I sound like his fucking therapist. But even so, there were signs in 2014 that McLaren were not going to nail these new regulations. A double podium in the first round of 2014 was the only time that season they ever got on the podium between both drivers of Button and Magnussen. And they were behind Ferrari in the constructors' standings. This was something Alonso could have seen. But at the end of the day, despite what I've said about that, I will pin some of this blame on bad luck, as the McLaren-Honda partnership did just fail, which was completely out of Fernando's control. And ultimately, whichever team Alonso did choose to go to at this point, whether it be Red Bull or stay at Ferrari, Williams or McLaren that he ended up with, none of them actually had a shot at the title during this time for the next 6 years after 2014, apart from Ferrari in 2018 and Red Bull after that in 2021 when they finally won it. Obviously, personally, I doubt he would have also got the Mercedes drive at this point because Lewis was doing so well, so was Nico, and then they didn't want someone to fight Lewis after Nico left. So all in all, no decision would have been the right one at that time. I'm actually going to pin most of it on bad luck and maybe a little bit of Mercedes dominance, good luck for them. And now moving on, we reach current Alonso, where again I do kind of ask, what more could he have done? It was a pretty good call to make his return with Alpine, who debuted the fresh paint they'd put on Renault with 2 pretty strong seasons. I also think that move to Aston Martin was the right thing to do at the time, and even at the moment still is his best option. In 2023, it was the second best car for a period. Then they signed Adrian Newey near the start of 2024. Then there's actually a shit ton of investment going into the team because Lawrence Stroll has more money than, I don't know, Lance Stroll has brain cells, but that's not really a lot. I know the start to 2025 has absolutely sucked balls for Alonso. I mean, really sucked proper arse. But they are banking on Honda engines, which have been good recently. I'm not just going to go back to GP2 engine. And then Adrian Newey designing them a top-level car for 2026. And obviously, Fernando is contracted to be there for that year. But also, what are the other options anyway? Maybe he could have had Lewis's seat at Mercedes for 1 year while they gave Kimi Antonelli a Williams drive. But right now, Mercedes aren't winning titles. And then they'd probably put Kimi in the car for 2026. So he's out of a drive for the new regulations.
Cheat.
He could possibly drive the Red Bull second seat, but again, that's geared towards a driver that has the exact opposite driving style that Fernando Alonso likes. And that's if Christian Horner will still even take him now. They have some good drivers in their academy, Hadjar, Arvid Lindblad coming through. And then of course, McLaren and Ferrari, the other 2 top teams, they've locked in their lineups. I mean, he could have stayed with Alpine, but they've done even worse than Aston Martin since Alonso left. And they're firing their drivers every other week. Honestly, the management over there is being run by Kurt Cobain post-haircut. So all in all, yes, Alonso has had some bad luck, as every driver does. But ultimately, there were other things at play. And I don't think it's fair to say he's the unluckiest driver in F1 history. That probably goes to someone like Wolfgang von Trips, because hey, at least Fernando Alonso's still alive. So maybe Alonso's luck will start to take some steps forward. And as delusional as I sound, maybe 2026 is our year. Please, mate. Please, 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 please. A quick reminder again to go check out davidtyresart.com, the sponsor of today's video, for some really cool artwork. Genuinely, I think this looks great and it really livens up the background. It's just been a white blank space there for a while. You can find that linked in the description and the pinned comment. A big thanks again to my channel members. Your guys' support really does help me out. It means a lot. Hope you have a lovely rest of your day and goodbye.